Hello and welcome to the first Fortean Wins podcast. I'm your host, Ram X, editor-in-chief of the ForteanWins.com website, and I'm here with my co-host, Bones.
Hey, how's it going?
We're here to tell you a little bit more about things that are normally termed as paranormal, things like UFOs, cryptids, strange science, poltergeists, and how those things are related. For myself, I did not know they were related until around 2019 or 2020 when I was stuck at home during the pandemic lockdowns and discovered the now famous 2017 New York Times article that discussed the Tic Tac encounter, and it gave us the Tic Tac videos. Did you see those, Bones?
Yeah, I did. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, so in 2017, many of you probably saw it. The New York Times published an article that changed the whole conversation around UFOs. And since then, I have been trying to figure out first whether the article was telling the truth, and then more about what UFOs are. For myself, it has been a process of self-discovery too, because it challenged everything that I thought was real. I was a very nuts and bolts technical sort of guy, and this has really changed my worldview and my perspective on a lot of things. So I come at my approach to the UFO phenomenon is really from an analyst and a data person's point of view. And so I started to gather other people around me who would help with Fortean Wins, who had that same perspective about UFOs. For the last couple of years, I've been trying to figure out what UFOs are. I looked for a website that would have some of this information. I couldn't find one, so I decided to put one together. People seem to like it, so we're going to do a little podcast companion to it. And Bones, what are you thinking about all these Fortean happenings?
All of this is somewhat new to me, but it really is fascinating. I think what really caught my attention was that the video. Was it like a Navy video? The Tic Tac video?
That's right.
Yeah,
the Tic Tac.
And they're trying to they were trying to capture it with their instruments. I remember watching that, and that just blew me away.
Yeah, the fascinating thing about that encounter, and I think the reason that it changed the narrative around UFOs, is that there was so much data associated with it. So there was multiple ships traveling with it. When a carrier like that travels, it usually travels with a couple of submarines, an entire boat full of radars. All of those things tracked this object, as well as the pilots tracked it visually. There was video from it. You had people on the ship who saw it. So the only people at this point who are saying that that's not real are either people clinging to a very, in my opinion, a very dicey scientific or natural phenomenon idea, right, or they're saying the government's lying. Right. And the government has lied on this subject, as I had come to find out.
Come on.
Well, truthfully, I didn't think that they could. It wasn't so much that I think the government wouldn't, because the government's lied about all sorts of things, and I love my America just like lots of other Americans, but our government's far from perfect. So there's been cases where the U.S. government has experimented on American citizens, right? It's not the first time. But in this case, I would say I just didn't think that they were capable to keep a secret this big for this long. I did not think that they were capable. And I would come to find out, really was during the pandemic when I started diving down this rabbit hole and compulsively researching in my spare time. And the more I found out, the more I wanted to learn. But the government has definitely not been honest on this, and they have kept this huge secret for a long time, and that was shocking. Yeah. I think it was almost as shocking as finding out UFOs are real.
Right.
Because you're sort of forced to ask, well, what else are they hiding? If they're hiding UFOs, they could be hiding anything.
Right.
Do you think this is do you think this is the greatest discovery in the history of mankind, that UFOs are real?
Yeah. The way it's being released is a slow release, right? And so maybe that is part of the plan. We don't want it all just to come at us all at once, because we probably couldn't handle it, right?
Absolutely. There's a RAND study that gets floated around, which basically one of the things that the government RAND, who does a lot of research for the government, and gets commissioned to do a lot of research for the government, and they had looked into this: what would happen if UFO disclosure happened? And one of the big dangers, which is pretty interesting because it did happen to me once I realized they were real, is it kind of threw me into a bit of a depression, because they were so far ahead. Oh. When I first started to look into UFOs, I wanted to know how they flew, and I thought I could build something. I like building things, and I was like, if we could figure this out, I could build, even if it's something that hovers on my desk. Right. I could do it. Number one, I don't know that this is a technology that we're really capable of replicating. Right. As a species. The second thing that really threw me on finding out exactly what UFOs are is the amount of high strangeness and weirdness associated with them. And it made me think that the government really doesn't understand what this is. But with that said, the RAND study was thinking that if a lot of our smartest people realized that there's no point to doing something like whatever it is that's in between us and anti-gravity, whatever that next step is for humanity after the airplane, if you see somebody that's 10 steps ahead, you go, what's the point in me trying to figure out, step 1.5? Like, right. It would kill innovation. So from what I read in that study, that was the number one concern, right. was that productivity would be shot. Yeah, right. But that's not a good reason to hold this back, right? I really think that my suspicion is that it's more about control, that the government doesn't, because it's all the world governments. Sure. It's not just the United States. Right. And in fairness, many of the world governments have now come out and made some of their UFO data public. So Russia publicized a bunch of theirs. The U.S. has at least admitted it through the 2019 New York Times article. Wasn't there an officer from France that came out once? Yeah, France has divulged a bunch. Yeah. The UK, sort of. Chile has given a lot of information and video, of UFO objects. So this is a good segue into talking about the fact that we really need to focus on the idea that UFOs are real for the sake of this podcast. I don't want to go back in time and go back to 2019 for me and have to redo the research all over for people who still don't believe these objects are real. If you don't believe they're real, I would just say that the U.S. government has said on 4 different occasions that these things are real, starting in 1952. So not long after the Roswell incidents and everything else, UFO fever was happening in the 50s, and UFOs visited the White House. What? So UFOs visited the White House. I haven't heard. Story in the 1950s, yeah. And somehow, at that point, everyone in the 1950s, from what I'm reading in the research, didn't think that the government could stuff this news back into the box, and they did somehow. But one of the ways they did it was Colonel John Sanford, and you can see this on the Fortean website. He just comes out and he says, UFOs are real, but we don't think they're a threat. And basically, the Air Force said that 3 more times prior to they've told the public on 3 different occasions, at least 4 different occasions that I'm aware of, hey, these things are real. So if you don't believe that they're real at this point, you're only set out. Really, the only way that you can not believe that these things are real anymore is by believing in a much bigger conspiracy, right? Which is that they were able to not only keep this quiet, but they were also able to keep technology quiet and create a charade that we would all buy into. Right, right. So from the Fortean Winds perspective and from this podcast perspective, we're not going to go down that road. What we're going to talk about is the fact that, which was my personal UFO journey, was to first find out that UFOs were real. And then to ask the pertinent questions of What are they? Where are they from? What do they want?
Right.
You're just kind of finding this out. Where were you on the UFO subject before all this, before Fortean wins?
I think I was pretty average, just kind of, ups and downs. You kind of believe in it, and then you're naturally skeptical about it. And but just like going back to that the Tic Tac video, that's the one that really opened my eyes, because you can hear the pilots celebrating, and you're chasing this thing, and it was amazing. That's just a one small part of it all. But what makes you? Why do you think that came out the way it did? Because they really gave a lot of information.
Yeah, and it's interesting. What I find interesting. So there's a couple of key characters from the government side in that moment. Which number one is Lou Elizondo, who is a former intelligence analyst, and he was working on the government's UFO program, and he was the one who slipped the tape to Christopher Mellon. And Christopher Mellon comes from the Mellon family, one of the richest families in the U.S., and is very well connected, and he's been in the intelligence world. He's a super well connected guy. So his involvement is interesting. And there are people, billionaires too. Bob Bigelow is a billionaire who's into this. Brendan Fugel, who owns Skinwalker Ranch now. These are billionaires that are interested in the subject, fund some of the research around it. But I find that those two characters did this very interesting, because they're kind of saying that they did this because they believed it was the right thing to do.
Right.
And to move the subject forward.
Right.
But at the same time, they're still working with the government in some capacity. So I can't imagine the government's too mad at them for being whistleblowers, which is a little weird. So my belief is that what they are saying is true. And that's the most important thing.
Right.
For me and for other people to try to outguess what the government is thinking in terms of disclosure and how they want to roll this out seems like it's less productive than thinking about and trying to understand the phenomenon ourselves. Because as a follow-on to the fact that the government's lied about this so much, are we now all turning to the person that's been lying to us for the past 80 years,
right,
and saying, hey, what is this? Can you tell me more about it? And you've been lying to me for 80 years.
Right.
Why? I'm not going to expect honesty, but I appreciate this modicum of honesty, because what it may allow us to do, what it's already allowed us to do, is to get some real research done on this subject. And this is the other reason I don't want to ever go backwards after this first episode and talk about whether UFOs are real or not, because the research has progressed. There are papers written on this subject about how to spot these things. There are papers about why they seem to be attracted to nuclear sites, whether it's nuclear power plants or nuclear weapons. And that's a whole field of research of UFOs hanging around nuclear sites. Even Chernobyl.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
There was an incident in Chernobyl and we'll talk about whether we think UFOs are good or bad for us a lot on this podcast, but that was Chernobyl incident, which is somewhat, I think I believe it. I believe that it's true. There was a UFO spotted there that the people, witnesses to it, believed, the Russian engineers and plant workers believed, was siphoning energy away from Chernobyl.
What?
And that it would have been worse.
So that's when it was operating.
The UFO wasn't there.
Oh, wow. So that's when it was operational? It was before the meltdown at Chernobyl?
It was when it melted down.
Oh, wow.
A UFO came and took off.
No kidding.
A chunk of the energy.
Interesting.
And I find that really interesting because I didn't find many instances of UFOs going out of their way to help people in any way.
Right.
But that's part of the purpose of this podcast, is to go, let's look at all of the events that we determined are true according to our veracity system, which is on the Fortean Winds website in the About section. We go through, how do we look at these cases to determine whether or not they really happened or not.
Right.
Some of the ways that are, were there multiple witnesses? Is there physical evidence? Was anything reported to the police? And the beauty of coming into this subject when I am, which is very late, there's been a plethora of amazing UFO researchers out there gathering data, every scrap of information, really hardcore, accuracy-driven investigators who recorded all this. And I think that was part of what inspired me to get Fortean Winds and put sources on there, call attention to their work, was that I thought there's really good evidence here. And what prevents us from talking about this in a real way is that we're still talking about whether it exists or not.
Right.
So, and that's always been in favor of anyone trying to keep it hidden. And I would just point out that there's not just the government that's been keeping this hidden. And from the Air Force's point of view, I can kind of see why they would keep this hidden. It's their job to protect our skies. If there's something up there that they can't protect us from, they don't want to talk about it.
Sure.
And there is I will talk about this. I think this is a whole episode later on, but there's in my mind, it's a 99% chance that the United States government is in possession of crafts and bodies. And I can go into some of the many pieces of evidence that would point to the fact that they have UFO craft and bodies, but they do. And so they don't want to talk about that, because if there is advanced technology in there, other governments are going to say, this gives you a way too big of a strategic advantage and you need to share this with us.
Yeah, right.
It'd be like us finding the next nuclear bomb,
right?
Or the next advancement to the nuclear bomb. They'd say, you can't do that. You have to share this with us. So they don't want to talk about the fact that they have crafts and bodies.
Right. And didn't you mention, I remember we talked about this before, that you said you believe that this material evidence that they have, they basically really don't know what to do with it.
I'm pretty sure, based on what and actually I won't say pretty sure, I'll give myself a 50-50 on this one. And I should mention, I work as an analyst a lot as part of my profession. So I tend to look at these things as probabilities. And I try to separate what's real information and that we found on the Fortean Winds website from our analysis. And I'll try to do the same on the podcast. And I'll give myself a 50-50 on this one. That I don't think that the government really has gotten far with reverse engineering these craft, because I don't think that there's something that we can really take advantage of.
Right.
Maybe we'll get into this much later time, but I tend to think that whatever's driving these UFOs, I think it's multiple entities, and it's way beyond us in terms of capabilities. And that could mean experiencing time differently, it seems to be able to materialize matter. The UFOs themselves are capable of transmedium travel. So they've been seen going into a mountain. They've been clocked by submarines going hypersonic speeds underwater.
Underwater. That's wow. I never heard of that. That's great.
And still showing up on radar. So that's bizarre.
Yeah.
Because if they're material enough to set off the radar, how are they moving through water at that speed?
Right.
So they seem to move through different phases of matter based on where they are. This isn't something that even the G-forces in the Tic Tac encounter, people have done a lot of math on how much pressure when that thing took a hairpin turn,
right,
at going thousands of miles an hour.
Right.
You'd have to be made of titanium in order to be in that craft at that time.
Or maybe a gelatinous blob, right?
Or gelatinous blob.
There's my expertise.
Maybe a pile of crap with legs. I don't know. So it's pretty wild, and I don't really know if we're going to be able to take advantage of it or not. But I am fascinated, and I think that was a big change for me. And that was a big change for me in the research, which was that I went from trying to figure out how UFOs flew to just trying to understand what the heck they are.
Right.
Or just vaguely understand what they are. And what really stood out to me as I got into the research more was how people were being affected. And I talk about this a lot on the website, some of the more popular articles, but people have been irradiated more than anything. People have been hurt.
Right.
And then I started to realize, this is kind of serious, and we need to look into this more. We need to stop pretending like it doesn't exist.
Right. So that's really interesting because there's like a public health concern too, and I know that could be like a whole series or at least an episode to talk about that too.
Absolutely, a public health concern and a public mental health concern when it comes to this, because there's an article on the Fortean website called "UFOs and Brain Damage: Stranger Danger." It goes into a lot of what has been documented as far as people who've gotten too close to these craft. And the one thing we know about these crafts is that they're a massive amount of energy. They're emitting a ton of energy. And the amount of energy that they're emitting is similar, or the effects of the energy would end up being similar to, on a human being, to standing too close to an electrical transformer.
Okay.
And if you stood too close to an electrical transformer, your outsides might look okay, but your insides would look like warm jello.
Right.
It irradiates you on a low frequency level. What's interesting, even though it's very morbid, is by the types of energy that people are hit with, it might give you an indication of what energy the craft is emitting during flight, which may give you a clue to what its propulsion is.
Right.
So what it looked like to me was that every kind of electromagnetic energy was flying off this thing, everything from gamma to microwave, and everything in between. So it was very difficult to tell from this what that was. I think a lot of researchers just kind of wrap that up by saying, it's anti-gravity, and that's what anti-gravity looks like. Sure. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I got to say that the amount of work that you've done on this website is pretty awesome. And I look forward to. I'm going to dive into it a lot more, and I have a lot to learn. But you've done your research, man.
Thanks, man. I really hope people check out the website, get the information that they're looking for, because that's what I was looking for. It was a website that would separate the information from what someone thought about it and not try to push their own narrative.
Right.
I've told you a little bit about what I think, that whatever these things are, they seem to present as something way more powerful than us, and not really human-like. But there are other people out there with all sorts of other theories on what that is. And I try to separate all that. So I go, look, if you think that these are extraterrestrials from Mars, that's fine, but here's the information.
Right.
You can make that work with your theory however you want.
Right.
So please check out the website if you're not sure UFOs are real. But if you're going to stick around with us, I think you have to be in the camp that UFOs have been proven through...
Pretty much.
Yeah, through multiple government disclosures, lots of sensor and instrumentation data, lots of credible witnesses. So
the time has come.
We're going to move past that.
Yeah.
You're sort of new to finding out that UFOs are indeed real. What's the burning question on your mind at this point?
Oh, there's so much because I'm really interested in the Jersey Devil research that you did, and you were talking about the Mothman, and was it the Dogman too? All these.
Yeah. There's a lot of cryptids that get involved with UFOs.
Yeah, see,
at
I
some point.
love that tie-in with it all. I can't wait to learn more about that.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to diving into it with you. And if you made it through the whole episode, thanks for sticking around with us.
Yeah,
this was our first one. And we look forward to jumping into this more with you in the future.
Right on. Let's do it.